All right, welcome to Lab 8. What if everything you've learned was BS? And there's your chemistry teachers saying, what? Because to us, BS is boron sulfur. It could also mean your bachelor's of science. That's me with Nittany Lion, because that's where my BS is from. And it also stands for belief system. And so, what is your belief system? So we're going to walk through 3 myths. Myth number 1, which you were taught from day 1 of chemistry, only matter matters. Reality is located in the tangible structure of matter. In fact, you're asked, what is the study of chemistry? And it is the study of matter, the material substance of the universe, what can be measured, quantified, analyzed. And so it comes from Aristotle's empirical materialism. Matter is fixed and unchanging, and therefore real. And then we have Descartes, who ushered in the scientific revolution, introducing analytical and reductive reasoning, that all science is certain, evident knowledge. We reject all knowledge which is merely probable, which is fascinating because this brings about what science is built off of. Yeah, he says, if it's probable, it's BS. Yet, what is quantum mechanics but all probability? Anyway, the Cartesian coordinates are based off of this gentleman, and he's all about dualism, and he was so strong of personality. He must have been extremely charismatic, that this is when the church and science separated, that the church became our spiritual hub, and science, the material hub, our physical being, all became the study of science. And this is when everything starts to change. The thing that's very interesting is we are in the age where it's coming back together, because we're realizing, anyway, what soon follows this guy is the mechanistic universe, still materialism, and the mechanistic universe, like this mechanical clock, the world can be understood through the knowledge of its physical parts. We have Sir Isaac Newton, who figured out the laws of nature. We could mathematically explain the physical universe. This is called a Newtonian clock, and this ushers in materialism at its best. Fascinating is Sir Isaac Newton actually wrote more books on alchemy. He also was a theologian and wrote a whole bunch of books on theology. So where's the separation there? Except they were separate books. And so we live in a material age. And so most people look at the clock and go, that's a pretty cool clock. I want to make one of those. How comfortable are you with this picture of the mechanistic universe, of the mechanistic you and I, that we are mechanical beings? Myth number 2, determinism, which is Sir Isaac Newton's 3rd law of mechanics. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. Of course, you guys are asked that question on the midterm that you're taking today, which what would be yesterday or the day before, whenever you're watching this. But right, that the pH decreased, so the hydrogen increased, so the reaction shifts reverse, and the E decreases because it's less spontaneous, right? So we can predict, we can control the outcome. You take that to medicine. That's where we have a pill for this, we have a pill for that. This is the cause of your disease, so this is what you need to do. Determinism. And take it to the nth degree. That is a molecule of DNA in the back. It is in your genes. That is what determines why you did this. And then, of course, myth number 3, reductionism. This is straight from Wikipedia. No, that the first picture of the duck was. This picture fascinates me, but we can take the whole of us and reduce us to our mechanical parts. Cause and effect. what fascinates me about this is I also have a degree in Chinese medicine, and in Chinese medicine is all about the whole body. So people want an herb. I'm amazed that people take ginseng, because ginseng is very specific and it's mixed with a blend that is specific for each individual who receives it. And yet this picture is in Chinese of reductionism. This is an article from the New England Journal of Medicine, probably the premier, one of two premier medical journals in this country from only 3 years ago. And it was proceeding through medicine in the US. So we start with "you're just sick" back in the 18th century, 200 years ago. And then it was, oh, we know what organ is sick. Oh, and we know the cause then. 100 years ago, we suddenly are like, oh, it's this bacteria or this microbe or something. And then we start even looking, no, beyond that we can tell you what molecule it is. And this molecule, and then we can change the molecule. So reductionism, determinism, materialism. We got a pill for that. And then what about us? Chemistry. It's all been based on this beautiful, amazing, marvelous table. It's all over my house. Like every room in the house has one of these somewhere. And right, that we've reduced. Everything is built off of matter. The material world is building blocks. These are the building blocks. We've reduced it to this. These determine, right? And our chemical equations, cause and effect. So the reactants to the products. And then we even talk about the atom, what makes these all up. So if we look at a spider web is a micron. And a carbon atom is about an angstrom. So there's 7,000 carbon atoms across the width of a single strand of a spider web. So which is it? And it gets even better when you're a biochemist like me. Well, we can then put the atoms together and say, what is that spider web made out of? It's these beta sheets. And oh, you guys all know those little dots between the oxygen and nitrogen, not shown correctly. It should be an H on the nitrogen. But it would be hydrogen bonding between the H on the hydrogen and the oxygen. If they're going to reduce it to this, they should at least reduce it correctly, right? And then we can combine it into fibers that make these beta sheets that look like a corrugated cardboard box that's showing up on everybody's doorstep every day, because materialism is what this is all about. Or how about the placebo effect? Why does it work? In fact, in depression, it works as well, usually better. How can that be? It doesn't work so well with contraception, by the way. But why is the placebo? How about with knee surgery? They actually did this where they actually cut the people's knee and you didn't know if you were the guy actually made the incision and did nothing. And the other half of the people, he did the incision and did something. There was absolutely no difference in the number of people who got better, that their knees got better, and between the two groups. So they just believed. And then there's the nocebo. It's down at the bottom of the page. This is a book, Dr. Joe Dispenza. I've mentioned him before, remarkable man. So if you ever get a chance to read any one of his books or listen to him on YouTube, I highly recommend him. And so he talks about through your meditation, through your beliefs, you become the placebo. And the nocebo, so this comes from the 70s. Before that, of course, in other places, but it was a gentleman came in, he'd had cancer. They treated him for the cancer. He was all better. And then he came back and he's like, I'm sick again, doc. And the doc said, oh my gosh, the cancer's come back and it's all over your body. You have 2 months to live. Guy dies 2 weeks later. They do an autopsy. They find absolutely no cancer anywhere in his body. And the doctor realized his words had influenced the gentleman's perception. In China, they don't tell you, or at least they didn't used to tell you, I don't know how it is now, but my Qigong teacher, who's 90 now, and so I started studying with her 25 years ago, and 20 years before that, maybe 15 years before that, she had stage 4 breast cancer. So this would be like 40 years ago. And so this is when the cancer has spread throughout your body, and they didn't tell her that there was nothing more they could do. They told the family, and so the family starts buying her gifts, and she doesn't know why. And so she keeps going in for her treatment. She's lost all her hair, and she's there waiting to get her treatment one day, and there's this guy sitting next to her who's just smiling and perfectly healthy. She says, "What are you doing here? You're not sick. This is a place for sick people. Go away." And he just takes her hand and takes her to the park and says, "You have to come with me," and introduces her to Qigong, and the cancer goes away. The tree where she did a lot of the Qigong cleansing, she says, is one of the most beautiful trees in all of Beijing. Anyway, yeah, how does all of that work? And then it's in your genes. This is actually a picture of a molecular robot replacing a defective gene. I put the quotes around defective gene because I don't believe in defective genes. And again, my degree is in genetic engineering, except back then they didn't have molecular biology. It was called biochemistry. But again, it said chemistry, and you had to take a lot of math, and not everybody could take the math. So, all right, materialism. Is that what genes are? Yeah. It's made up of molecules, of matter, of atoms. Determinism. Your genes determine who you are. Reductionism. You're reduced to what your genes are. It's called DNA karma. But it's not the karma. It's the driver. You are the conductor of your molecular symphony. You determine. And mine looks like that. It's flowers and butterflies. It's in your genes. How about it's in your greens? We talked about this. Eating food from Mother Nature causes a very different impact on your body. And pretty sure you all played along with me at least for 1 week. And some of you are in for the whole 30 days and hopefully in for life. There are vibrations with food. That's where we're going with this. Spoiler alert. And so they can actually take pictures. And there's no vibrations with this highly processed food over on the right side. Leads to acidosis. Your body knows the difference. So science is in my genes. It's become a religion. The reductionist genetic train of thought fuels the currently highly fashionable concept of a gene for this, a gene for that. So some of you may not know your biology. I'm not taking biology, but there's something called the central dogma. That's what they actually call it. That was from Watson and Crick. And so dogma is a religious statement. It is the creed of genetic determinism that we have followed. DNA to RNA to protein. So a gene is a segment of DNA that codes for a specific protein. And so it is taught that this is how it goes. The thing is, it is known that the flow is not one way. Notice this picture is not in English. You can't find this picture in English. Why? You're limited by your teacher's beliefs. Are your genes your destiny? This gentleman is Dr. Bruce Lipton. He is amazing. I cannot recommend him enough. So around the DNA is a protein sleeve. His PhD was in electron microscopy. He is 80 years old, has written 3 brilliant books. I show a picture of one in a moment. Your DNA is dormant potentiality until a signal from the environment starts a chain of events. A signal from the environment. It is not the DNA. You can actually remove the DNA from the cell and the cell is fine. The cell just can't replicate, but the cell survives. It is the signal from the environment that starts a chain of events. And then the gene moves from potential to expression, making the protein. Epigenetics, beyond genetics. I think we should be doing epichemistry, beyond chemistry, beyond the periodic table. You determine. We all determine together is actually what it is. The thing that is fascinating about DNA, again, this is what my background truly is. So only 2% of our DNA, human DNA, actually codes for proteins. That's something that's very unique about humans. And is actually the part that's fascinating. This is his book. It is considered one of the greatest books written. It's the best book I've read. I highly recommend it. It will change your perception. And the moment you change how you look at the situation is when your eyes, the perception of any given thing at any given moment can influence your brain chemistry, which in turn affects the environment where your cells reside and control their fate. He was in his 40s and he was miserable, and he was teaching in medical schools, several, including Stanford, University of Wisconsin. Anyway, and then he had a moment trying to figure out his notes. He had an epiphany and everything changed. Cannot find a picture of this guy not smiling. He is considered one of the 100 most spiritually influential people. He has been for like decades now, up there with the Dalai Lama. It's like something that's put out in Japan every year, who these people are. So what signals release of your genie? Well, the external environment, your diet, your friends, your support system, and of course, what you're exposed to, and our internal milieu. So the milieu is your environment. Milieu was the term that Louis Pasteur used, and was actually on his deathbed that he did say the other guy was right. So Louis Pasteur gave us the germ theory. There was another gentleman at the same time who said, yeah, so what? We have germs. It's the environment that determines if the germ is going to do anything. You've all been there where everybody else in the house gets sick and you don't. Why? What was different about you? That's the thing that we should be looking at. Every thought, every feeling, every intention, your beliefs, your faith, your view of God, judgmental or loving, nourishing. The memories we associate with each of these beliefs and feelings, they are the tools of our consciousness. And consciousness, by the way, is considered one of the few remaining questions in science, the true remaining questions. And this is what physics, the high level of physics, is looking at. Everybody else is looking for a gene for this, a gene for that, a drug for this, a drug for that. They're looking into consciousness. So each of these releases a cascade of biochemicals. The key is the thought is what releases the biochemicals. Our bodies respond with an array of shifts. Thinking Le Chatelier, anybody? But what's the cause? And what's the effect? If you actually believe in that. Genes only contribute to our characteristics. They do not determine them. This is from a book called The Genie in Your Genes. I happened to find at Goodwill back in January, and it was an amazing book. Absolutely loved it. Another gentleman he's actually a psychologist, and he's kind of grumpy, and then one day had an epiphany, and you cannot find anything without him smiling and laughing and just enjoy. Because that's the only thing that's important, is enjoying wherever you are. And he said, our body is a system of cooperation. It doesn't make a moral judgment about our feelings. It only responds. Our body, and I talked about this before, cannot tell the difference between a real versus a perceived, imagined threat. We are the only species that can create stress. My dog, my cat, there has to be an actual physical stress for this to happen. But you and I can create it in our minds. We also always have the choice. Do we want to have the stress response, or do we want to breathe and have the healing response? And in all honesty, if that's what you get out of my class, that's the key of it all. Another book by Bruce Lipton, where he talked about those materialism, determinism, reductionism. I've seen it in actually a couple books, and he talks about some of the other myths that science has perpetuated. And then this idea that we are on this verge right now, going through a metamorphosis. The thing that is amazing about a butterfly, the caterpillar that goes into the cocoon, there is nothing left of it that comes out. Nothing. There's some really cool articles about this. And that's what a metamorphosis is. And so choose love. Always choose love. A crazy yoga teacher But the one statement why I studied with him for several years was because he made the statement one day that every moment has a million, a billion, a trillion potentialities. Find the most loving potential and follow that path. Whenever you have to make a choice, follow the most loving one. Doesn't mean it's the easiest one. There's a place at Stanford University called HeartMath Institute, and they took a whole bunch of people and they hooked up electrodes to their brain and their heart and on their skin. The thing that's really cool about the heart and the brain, you don't actually have to put the electrodes on them. You can put them several, I can't remember if it's feet, inches, feet away, because they're giving out an electromagnetic field and they can get the measurements. They are the exact same as if they put them right on the surface. The dermal sensors were for the skin response, and then they had you stare at a blank computer screen, and every few seconds an image would appear, either an emotionally arousing one, such as an autopsy, sex, violence, or a calming one. I chose to show you all a calming one of nature or people smiling. So that's my Joey, back apparently in 2005. So the question is, what responded first, the heart or the brain? Well, of course, it was the heart. Before there was any brain response, the heart responded to the image. Every single person, every single time. That gets more interesting. Both the heart and the brain actually responded before there was actually any image on the screen. So the heart, then the brain responded. Even more interesting, they both responded before the random image generator in the computer had even generated an image at all. This is all happening in that femtosecond time. The heart, then the brain responded, and then the computer made a choice and presented the image. Still believe in cause and effect? And then the body responded. You had the skin tingles or whatever happens when you see the different pictures. All right, so there's something called heart and mind coherence. And whether you know what the word coherence means or not, this picture speaks a million words. So the green one shows you, if you're colorblind, that would be the one on your right, where the heart and the mind are in sync. Something even more interesting is 95% of the connections, the neurons between the heart and the brain, are from the heart to the brain. Most of the communication is from the heart. 95% is from the heart to the brain. Coherence is known as a fluid state of awareness. It is what happens in prayer and meditation, in that gratitude, when you feel that easing calmness, when something happens and you just let go and everything moves back into this easing calmness versus incoherence. We've all been there when you get anxiety and stuff. So an inner state of ease and focus on the here and now. What happens actually is this. So frustration, anxiety is the top one where everything's all over, it's incoherent, and the lower one would be appreciation or gratitude. And what it means by greater heartbeat variability, if you notice in the lower picture, those are not the same. There is variation happening. And the more variation you have, the more adaptable you are. And you have a more open heart. That variation is good, not to the point of the frustration where there's like, what's even happening there? It's like total chaos, right? Heart intelligence is fast because our heart is our magnetic center. It's about magnetism. There's no ego, no frustration, no self-worth. There is just love. It is a hotline to our subconscious. It is our intuition. It is our connection to others. So between parent and child. So even if you are not a parent, you're all a child. You all have that connection to somebody and you just know. You don't need your phone to know. You don't need a text message to know. You just know. And the thing is we are all connected. It is a thread that is thinner than the spider web, thinner than anything. And we get a stronger connection. So right now, all of us in this class, we have a stronger connection because we're going through this right now together. And it goes away in the next week. All right, from love springs energy and matter. Yeah, so I don't know what your teacher taught you the first day, but there is matter, which is chemistry, and the other thing is energy, the force in Star Wars, or chi. And so where energy and matter come together, it's actually where energy and matter come from is love. And from that, all possibilities. So, are we just molecular chemical factories, limited to cause and effect chemical interactions? A pill for this, a pill for that. We can fix global warming with these molecules that will clean it up? Or are you something much, each of us, much, much more? And this is why I'm so grateful I get to teach chemistry, because I get to talk about quantum realm. So those of you who had me, you remember we talked about, you all learned, right? The nucleus is where all the mass is, right? The gold foil experiment, 99.9999999. There's now like 19 or 25 nines, who knows? We'll keep going on infinite. That we are empty space. Atoms are empty space. But that word empty is fascinating, because in that space, remember, there's more empty space in an atom than there is in outer space. And in that space, that quote unquote emptiness is energy, filled potential. It's where your beliefs and your intentions turn into matter. Your beliefs and intentions create a filled potential, which becomes matter and manifests. And so the GIF is a little bit too much. There's actually some really cool ones on there. The thing that's really crazy is when you try to Google what the quantum model is, you get more materialism and reductionism and so on. But going back to my biochemistry roots, there is this lock and key model that our molecules bind to a receptor and they fit in like a lock and key, or neurotransmitters, and we create a signal which moves at the signal there where it's the chemical part, it's moving at 0.5 meters per second, which is pretty darn fast. And then the neurons, of course, are sending an electrical chemical signal by ions moving at 268 miles per hour. However, electrical signals would produce heat, which doesn't happen in our neurons. Something's a little fishy here. That's what our dog's saying. What's going on? And this is the key. It's not about the mechanical chemical signal or the electrical signal. You guys, how many of you actually still open your car with a key? And how many of you push a button and it's automatically opened? The electromagnetic signal. It's probably faster than the speed of light. That's why it has questions on there. That's why your dog is saying, think about your keys. We don't use keys. We are an electromagnetic signal that tells our body what to do. The fascia, which is that thin layer that covers all your muscles, that is where it moves through. There's actually some really cool stuff out there about this. In the United States, because we sit so stiff and we walk so stiff, we're so stiff now. In other countries, they move very fluid and they're always moving all their body and they don't have the stiffness. And so if we're stiff, if our fascia is tight, how is the signal going to do what it's going to do? And then it gets even more interesting, because in the cells, you learn, like in biology, about the cell structure. There are these things called the microtubules. So down the bottom left corner, it's pointing. And they thought this was the skeleton system. That was like what gave structure to your cells. Well, they've now realized they're the antennas for the electromagnetic signal. This is a picture I found of a cell, and I love it. Those of you who've taken cell biology, this reminded me of the pictures you all were sending me for your QA labs. and for your bridges in the oxidation reduction. Those are the most important things of the term. And your demos, I'm so excited, looking forward to what you're going to be doing with those. So what if consciousness is central? There's that word again, consciousness, central to transforming the unconstructed quantum world of possibility into something, the material world, that resembles our everyday reality. I mean, our reality is not fixed, but it is fluid, and it's open to influence. It's a quote from Lynn McTaggart. I had a talk with somebody the first or second day of class, and I can't remember who it was, but another person. So quantum entanglement, this is from the Hubble Space Telescope. You've all seen pictures from there, right, of the stars, and you're like, wow, and people have pictures of these. And it shows everything as separate stars. And we gaze at the stars every morning and every night. I go out and do my Qigong and look at the stars. That's what I see. That's what the Chandra telescope sees. There is a connection between everything in our galaxy, an energetic connection. So, what you've learned, we're discrete particles. Are you comfortable with that to explain your existence? That's what you're going to be tested on, right? Do the tests really matter? From atoms gaining, losing electrons, Leo Goering, molecules binding receptors, Lewis structures, that there's 2 trillion galaxies of stars in a tablespoon of water. That's the mole of water, 6.02. Yeah, there's the number. And they actually can never know the number. They can only know it's like 8 digits, and then they know it's that big, but the number varies depending. So my question is, how comfortable are you with the intangible waves, string theory, electromagnetic signaling, consciousness, energy healing, and miracles? So the chakra system again, and our DNA, reading our DNA. Can we reprogram our DNA and heal ourselves with frequency, vibrations, and energy? If that's really what we are. Can meditation change your DNA? Oh, you betcha. They've actually shown it. What's even more interesting is when they read the sequence. Now that we've sequenced human DNA and we read the sequence, it is a symphony. It actually has a harmonic to it. You can Google it. It's all about the vibes. Vibes are stronger and faster. That's like the biggest understatement ever. Proteins. It's all about the proteins and how proteins fold. It's all about vibrations. We get caught up with the carbons, the hydrogens, the nitrogens, but it actually, when they make it into these ribbon structures, it has to do with vibrations. And the studies are finally coming out that proteins actually respond to vibration. You can have constructive or destructive. So Tai Chi and Qigong is constructive. So Qi, there's really, I always thought there was no way to describe it. People say the vital force, the energy system. It's also prana in Sanskrit, in yoga. And people use the word, and I think the word, the actual translation word in English that we have, that is the same for them, is love. Right. If you get the destructive interference, the wrong signal, you get dis-ease. You're no longer at ease. That's where the word comes from. So trauma or toxins like your food, which this is both, or your thoughts and emotions, that internal milieu is just as toxic as that burger. And so we need to raise our vibrations. So many things you can do, laughing, walking in nature, sunshine, looking at the sunrise, forgiveness, love, joy, gratitude. The thing that's interesting about this picture is Janae actually used this picture last term in her talk. And I believe that week, I also used it in my talk for my other class. And so she and I have talked about many times that we're on like some kind of wavelength, and we all are right now. We as a class are all connected. You just be there. And remember that the biggest change of all, to the telomeres, to acidosis, and to shift you to alkalosis, was service to others. In the study of depression, what they found was the people who did what made other people feel better got themselves out of depression. Rather than trying to do what makes you feel better, letting go of yourself and doing things for other people. When you are feeling your worst, your saddest, go and do something for somebody maybe you don't even know. Or just simply say grace, or just go outside and water the plants. Plants are somebody's too. That's because now I go off on the whole thing with the guy who did the water crystals, and love made these beautiful water crystals. Always choose love. So the Dalai Lama, and again, the butterfly metamorphosis, nothing that was originally there is there at the end. So when you think what's going on, you can completely redefine yourself. Giving the ones you love wings to fly, the roots to come back, and a reason to stay. And then Jesus, the greatest healer of all, and how he healed was his heart was always open, and it was with love. People just needed to be near him, and they could feel the love. So are you comfortable with the discrete particles, molecules, the atoms, ion channels, hormone molecules binding? pH gradients are what makes ATP, which gives us energy. Diet, drugs, acidosis, alkalosis. Sure, we can study, we can do the math. So how comfortable are you with intangible waves, quantum entanglement, string theory, infinite potential, the butterfly effect, which is entropy, electromagnetic signaling, consciousness, energy healing, miracles? It's all about the vibes. It doesn't matter how many calories you eat. It matters what you eat. You have to eat real food. And the chakras, each one has a vibration. There's the healing sounds. This is the top right corner is meditation I do every morning. I learned it during the spring term. And I'd had a very profound, when I first learned it 2 years ago, moment in my Tai Chi class, and I just decided I was going to learn it. Acupuncture. You don't need the needles. You don't need the needles. And laughter. You want to talk about the best vibrations of all? Giggle until you jiggle. All right. And so don't be this guy in the morning. Don't turn on your Facebook first thing in the morning or last thing before you go to bed. Wake up with gratitude. You can listen to somebody, or you just sit there. You can do a fancy yoga pose, or you can just snuggle with your puppy or your kitty. And you just place your hands on your heart, and you just take a few deep breaths every morning and every evening, and it is a game changer. I had you write it down, but you get to a point you don't need to write it. And then you eventually get to a point you don't even need the words. So this is a quote from the Dalai Lama again. If you want others to be happy, practice compassion. If you want to be happy, practice compassion. Happiness is making others' lives easier. I found this picture actually last night after I was looking at more of your guys' worksheets, and it just reminded me of the bridges that you guys all were making. And so even though you may not know anybody else or only one other person in the class, you guys have all been there for each other in an energetic way. You've all been bridges. All right, so the Earth's magnetic resonance, if you did not know, actually is the same vibration as your heart rhythms. That's me doing my Qigong. This one's in Montana, looking out over Yellowstone National Park. And that's what I feel when I'm doing my Qigong, is I'm just butterflies and flowers, and you can be whatever your mind imagines. Actually, yeah. And so that's not me dancing, because if I was dancing, I would fall on my face. But we're not just beings of matter. We're energetic beings. And so optimize your quantum potential and let your electrons dance with your awareness. And you can go back and read that other thing. That was a cation affirmation. And with love, all things are possible. Follow your dreams and dream. Dare to dream. Oh, that was a YouTube video from Bruce Lipton. Upgrade your belief system to match your vision. So I guess that's my question for you is, what is your belief system? So something I talked about probably sparked something, a thought in you. Some people will be discussion on the nocebo. Some people, maybe it was, what do you mean matter doesn't matter? Pick one or two things and write a page. Write a solid paragraph about 2 or 3 things. You can write that I am full of BS. I'm not actually full of boron and sulfur because that's a fire and brimstone. But what's your belief system? Good day. Many blessings and thank you. Oh, and remember, the other half of your lab is attending our demos.